Hey, what's happening, guys? Happy Friday. Welcome to the weekend, everybody. And it's a great weekend because it's opening NFL weekend. So I know Bellman's all balls to the wall in baseball still, but for most of y'all, very excited to play some football this weekend. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed the showdowns and enjoyed the game last night. Uh, this Clyde Edwards-Helaire kid looks like he's going to put up some big numbers in this offense.
Yeah, definitely looked good last night. Didn't even catch any balls, so very encouraging there. Also, a nice spot for him though. So don't want to take too much out of week one, but I was already high on him. I mean, I had in all my fantasy leagues, I have exposure to some of those guys, so I was happy with the performance last night.
Right. So I've been burned by drafting rookie running backs enough that I never want to spend like mid first round type of money on that where he's been going. So I didn't grab him. And one game into the year, it feels like a mistake because he looks good. The Chiefs offense looks good. They look like they haven't lost a beat. And again, it's only one game, but this guy's going to put up some numbers for that team. You gave me the comparison of Brian Westbrook from watching him in college. And the body type, he definitely looks that type, doesn't he?
No doubt about it.
So, all right, man, guys, get your money in at Overlay. We did the NBA breakdown earlier, so that's good. Gino, you comment on the videos every day asking for the Overlay stuff. It's out. Congratulations on being able to watch it. It seems to be a bigger deal to you than anybody else, but I love the fact that you're always commenting and looking for us to do the Overlay videos. So we will run through NFL tomorrow. NBA is out today. Progressive jackpots are building. And once we get a few minutes, which there hasn't been any of it this week, we'll play around with their new format and tell you guys about it next week sometime.
Yeah, can't wait to talk about that. Got a lot of stuff going on, obviously multiple sports. So if you haven't checked them out, go do it today.
Yeah, and if we get any internet interruptions, guys, I will take the blame for that. I got two kids trying to learn and do homeschooling at home. They're stuck on like Google Meets and stuff like that. So my internet's probably not the normal high speed that it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Big announcement. It's the last day of the sale on the NFL only package. That is the full season of NFL. Only $80. I'm taking it down at the end of the day. If you want to save $20, it's up there on the website. We'd love to have you guys come join the team. Let's go win some money this year. Thumbs up is appreciated. Subscribe to the station if you're new to it. Otherwise, monthly, annual, and lifetime customers get every sport that's going. We want to talk about Shane Bieber and what to watch for right here. I'm sure most of you, since we're bringing this out a little bit later in the day, have already been privy to the fact that this game is on a little bit of a weather watch right now. Depending on who you follow, probably depends on how they feel about this one. It appears to be significantly up in the air. If this game is cleared and given the thumbs up by the weathermen, which we are not weathermen, you have to assume that Bieber will enter for being massive chalk once again because he has been the best pitcher in baseball this year and specifically for DFS even by a pretty good margin.
Yeah, so again, we're not weathermen, we're not meteorologists, but I mean, this guy strikes out 10 plus basically every time he pitches. It's hard not to look at him at every slate he's on. You made the point in our members only video. It's really sticking with me. This won't continue forever. And I felt a little bit like uneasy about it the past couple of starts, but man, he's just been dominating. He cut up your Brewers so easily. His strikeout stuff is second to none right now in the game. It's a pleasure to watch. He's the definition of a fade at your own risk at this point.
For sure. I mean, watching him against the Brewers, he kind of ran through the first two innings, first two or three innings really quickly. And I wouldn't say it was a struggle, but a struggle by his very lofty standards this year towards the end. He still like walks into 30 points. That's how this guy is playing this year. You said fade at your own risk. It's a big fade at your own risk because there are other pitchers we like on this slate. But if Bieber goes out and just does what he's done in every other start this year, with the exception of like his bad start where he only had 20 points, he's going to be he's going to be very highly owned. I guess the question is, if this game is more in question, do you want to take a chance on a lower owned Bieber if it scares off some of the people watching the rain?
No, not if there's weather concerns. I'm not going to play a guy like lower owned like this, spend this much of my salary on a guy like that if I think there's a decent chance the game doesn't play. I'd rather just fade it and just hope that he doesn't pitch amazing, you know?
And that's where I think how you play games, guys, should really factor into that equation. Are you somebody that sets 100 lineups and they're all $3 a pop? Well, then you're going to want some exposure.
Exactly.
You play like 2, 1, 2, or 3 lineups, all bigger dollar buy-ins. So you don't want to waste, $100 or something like that on give it, a zero from a pitcher. So it's going to vary depending on how you're playing. If you're a cash game player, it's hard to put any real stock into a guy that might have weather issues. Sounds like this one is going to come right down to the nitty gritty. And honestly, the availability for Bieber has a lot to do with how I feel about the slate. Because if he's out, that shifts a big change to who the hitters are people are looking at. All of a sudden, guys like Trout become significantly more popular because people aren't going to double pay up. So there's a lot hinging on the weather in Minnesota tonight. And Minnesota has a history of canceling games very early.
Yeah, it definitely changes the entire slate. So it's something to watch out for. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we didn't want to talk about Bieber because, everybody knows to play him, but we thought there was enough in the mix here today that was at least worth a discussion point on the public video for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's keep up with the chalk talk right now. Jared Walsh, very low owned from what I expected him to be during the day slate yesterday. So I was watching this game closely. We had a little baseball on during the day. He's a $2,500 first baseman going on 3 straight double-digit games with homers in 2 of them, playing in Coors Field. He's going to be popular.
Yeah, he's going to be popular and for good reason. I mean, listen, he's another fade at your own risk type play. It's a lot less risky when you talk about hitters as opposed to pitchers. However, all it takes is at this price point, he gets a solo home run. It's a good play. He does more than that, and it's hard to win without him because he's so cheap. That being said, he's this cheap for a reason. He is playing well right now, but I think what do you expect his ownership to be all over tonight?
Well, especially if Bieber is in play and people need lower salary, I think you're looking at – depends how early the lineup gets released too. Although with the slate starting later, you're going to have it in plenty of time. So I would think 50% in cash games-ish.
Yeah, same. And I was kind of surprised that Stewart was only 30% in tournaments the other day.
Yeah, I could see it being higher than that too, especially if Bieber is good to go and people try to double stud at pitchers, and then this guy helps you a ton. So one of the things you like to do, and I'm going to speak for you a little bit, even though we talked about this earlier, is you like to just fade a guy like this quite simply because he's going to be very highly owned, and it's Jared Walsh. This is not a great Major League Baseball player that you expect to have a big game. And also, just because Mark has had a couple of bad games earlier this year, he's also really good. So there's a real case to be made in the fade in GPPs because, if he goes out and does nothing but grabs a walk and a run today for 4 points and you can get, a solo home run out of your first baseman, that's a $10 bump on the field.
I'll fade any hitter at that ownership, specifically when they're a guy like Jared Walsh. I completely understand the spot he's in. And again, in any optimal line, just looking to make a cash line, you definitely play in him. But, I'll fade Mike Trout at that ownership. So, hell yeah, I'll fade Jared Walsh.
Yeah, he's not a great baseball player. Now, we had a long conversation about him on the members-only video because I view it a little bit differently. But it also depends, is Bieber in play? Because if Bieber's in play, I need his paydown spot. And I'll play him. And then that's where, for me, I'm fine with a guy like this. If he can get you a double and an RBI for 7 points, you win with or without him, but he helps me build the rest of the lineup the way that I like it.
For sure.
And that's the most likely scenario, right? That he probably grabs, 5, 7, 8 points or something like that. And you're very capable of winning with or without him.
Agreed.
All right. Next up, let's
ask you this before we move on. I told you he got 7 points tonight. You playing him? You're not playing him.
If I need the salary cap space, I'll probably take the free 7 points in cash games if I play cash games tonight. And it would depend on the rest of my build. You don't set him into your lineup, but if he fits, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Listen, 7 points isn't awful either. It's not what you want, but it's not awful.
No, we've both won plenty of tournaments with guys with 7 points in our lineups, right? It's
exactly.
Not that 7 points is 7 better than 0, which, those zeros are the ones that kill you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about Ty France and the Seattle Mariners as kind of a little bit of a contrarian stack. Not saying they'll be 1%, but we never expect them to get a substantial amount of love. Caleb Smith had a really good start to last season. So I do also think there's a lot of people that look at this name and probably thinks he's better than he is. He really, was not nearly as good in the second half. He's only played once this year. He's had to deal with COVID. He's thrown, I think, a total of 3 innings all year, so he's probably not as sharp as.
Yeah, so Seattle's been a team that's gone under the radar kind of all year. They remind me of Baltimore in a lot of ways. We talked about them in our members-only video. So Caleb Smith is certainly not a bad pitcher. He's not a gas can, but he's a guy that can definitely give up some home runs. And France at 3,800 is seeing the ball well right now. He was a guy that always hit for a ton of power in the Padres minor league system. Got traded in the Austin Nola deal. Has been given a chance to start every day and looks good here. I think Seattle is in play as a stack, as a mini stack. They're a little bit more affordable than they have been. The middle of their lineup is actually pretty cheap, and France stands out with dual position eligibility at 3,800 and two nice positions like second base and third base. You can get him in there somewhere.
Yeah, and even if you roll with the two most expensive pitchers on the slate, he's not a help to your salary cap, but he doesn't hurt it.
No, for sure. Agreed.
All right, so let's talk about a guy who's been a massive disappointment for the majority this year, and that's Adalberto Mondesi of the Kansas City Royals. Shortstop, 2,800, matched up with Stephen Brault today. And Brault is firmly mediocre. You probably don't run on most slates to pick on Brault, but you also don't run to play him either because he's firmly in that mediocre range. Mondesi at 2,800 has finally been doing some damage lately. I know we talked about him a few weeks ago, and he proceeded to have another terrible game. Well, he's got hits in a bunch of straight games, and they're all a lot of single-hit games, but he's got 2 home runs in the past 4, and he runs. If he can just get on base, he runs as aggressively as anybody in the game.
Yeah, Mondesi's a guy I feel like I bring up too much, so I'm glad we brought him up today with you on the video with me because I knew I'd definitely get here tomorrow if not, and I'd be doing it solo. And I know some of you guys might disagree with this, but again, how many guys are 2,800 that have serious home run, stolen base upside like Mondesi? Not many. He looks good right now. I watched a ton of his at-bats against Cleveland. I know he was in a good ballpark, but he was facing better pitching against Cleveland than he will tonight against Pittsburgh, Brault in the bullpen. At 2,800, he's one of the first cheap guys I'm looking at. And quite honestly, I don't think he gets a lot of love at all because there's cheap guys all over.
Yeah, and he's been collectively awful for the vast majority of the season. This is a guy who was, I want to say if you go back to last year, was earmarked as a second and third round fantasy pick because of his ability to steal 50 bases and probably hit 20 home runs. Well, he's been trash for the vast majority of this year. That's why he's so cheap. But he's starting to show signs. There's a difference between a guy like Jared Walsh, who's not that good, but just happens to be playing well, versus a guy who's actually very talented, who's just been muddled in a slump for a month.
Yeah, and I will say this about Mondesi. The one thing that could change is ownership because they're dying to get him back in the 2-hole and he plays well. If that happens tonight, then he looks like a solid cash game play.
Absolutely. All right, last up, you asked me to pick out the last guy. Somebody I've been looking at all morning, I completely forgot to mention on members only, is Avisail Garcia, the Milwaukee Brewers. You talked about this about a month ago, how John Lester was off to a great start, but it was all smoke and mirrors. Well, since then, he's been pretty terrible. Garcia is a guy who, for his career, has always hit left-handed pitching very well, seen the ball really well. I think he's got 5 walks over the last few games, had a couple of hits the other day when the Brewers actually went off against Detroit. This is also a must-win series for Milwaukee. This is a good time for them to bring their A game and try to take at least 2 games this weekend to keep themselves relevant in this division.
Yeah, it's on a really good side. We're both Avisail Garcia fans. And the beauty about this, I think his ownership is a little bit lower than it normally would be here because a guy that we forgot about that's coming back tonight, that's basically the same exact price as David Dahl, who's getting a ton of love, who wasn't having a great year before he got hurt. Now it's just going to get a lot of love because he's cheap and hitting for Colorado. I love the pivot to Avisail Garcia. Makes a lot of sense. A guy with big power upside against lefties, too.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised at all if Avi is batting leadoff tonight with a lefty on the mound.
Love that.
So, all right, guys, that's what we got for today. We appreciate y'all watching. Have a wonderful day. Click the thumbs up button, and we'll see you tomorrow for some football discussion.
Thanks, guys.